Roads are more than just grey strips of asphalt dividing up the landscape. All over the world, roads are communication routes, linking important places. They can be seen as the prerequisite for human coexistence. It was only through the construction of roads that trade and travel became possible. For centuries now, roads have been a rich source of tales and history, but some of them harbour dangers, death, and a lot of human suffering. Worldwide, in the 20th century alone, some 35 million people lost their lives on roads, and a further 1.5 billion were injured. What this man says applies to far too many routes. Some of the world's most dangerous roads are located in the mountains, far away from civilization. Others, totally congested and seemingly devoid of any order, run through towns and villages or through major cities. Some roads were built under appalling conditions by slave labourers and prisoners of war. Others are even in the grip of evil spirits, which, so the locals believe, kill travellers. Roads overcome mountains and force travellers to look down into chasms, or they bridge them. Roads are the arteries of humankind, its cities and its economies. Anyone travelling on roads where death stalks is taking a great risk. But usually, there is no alternative. Some roads are wide, splendid and famous. Others are merely nameless tracks. No one knows where they begin or end. But this road in the Bolivian Andes, which links La Paz with the Yungas region in the tropical lowlands, is not only a commercial route for coca leaves, tropical fruit and electrical appliances, it is a road full of adventure and tragic fates.
In Spanish, the road is called La Carretera de la Muerte, the road of death, because sadly, if a bus or a person plunges 400 meters into the depth, that's it.
Dieter Hübner knows all about Bolivia's road of death, not as an ordinary traveller, but as a keen racing driver. As a small boy, together with his parents, a German father and a British mother, he came via the Netherlands to live here in the capital, La Paz. That was in 1938. Dieter was still young when he taped his starting number to his old Mercedes and, just for fun, took part in his first race. And came second. From then on, the petrol in his veins really began to bubble. While still employed as an electro-technician, Dieter began working on his career as a racing driver. He won the Grand Prix in neighbouring Peru, performed well in the London to Mexico rally, and was twice winner of the Road of Death rally.
My father drove around here with me when I was young. I often had to take the wheel, and he'd sometimes shout at me if I didn't change gear smoothly.
This road links the capital, La Paz, with the Yungas region. Anyone setting out in this mountain region with peaks up to 5,000 meters high will pass this impressive warning symbol. The Bolivian government had the monument built to draw travelers' attention to the dangers of the Yungas region. The people of the Yungas region supply La Paz with agricultural produce every day. And in stores in the capital, the inhabitants of its hinterland purchase flat-screen TVs, which are in great demand, and other electrical goods that are not available in the mountain villages. Thus, the Road of Death is also a lifeline and a trade route for the inhabitants of the capital, La Paz, and the farmers in the remote mountain villages of the Yungas region.
For most people, there's no alternative. It's only us bus drivers who actually drive through the Yungas region. And there's perhaps a flight to Beni in the provinces, but that's about all. And there's no other form of transport. It's the bus or nothing.
This bus terminal is used by everyone travelling into the mountain villages from La Paz. The ticket sellers call out the destinations because there are no fixed departure times. Each bus only leaves when as many seats as possible have been filled and the luggage has been stored safely in the vehicle's spacious hold. The drivers all know that it is not only they who are taking a great risk on the road, because it's not just goods they're transporting, but also human beings.
When you transport people here, you're carrying a lot of responsibility. We are really focused when we set off with passengers sitting behind us. Since we drive the roads once or twice a week, we need to be really rested beforehand. You can't afford to be tired at the wheel. There is no way you can do a round trip on these roads in just one day.
Two teachers and a commuter know what they're in for.
We make the round trip from La Paz to the Yungas region every weekend, so I'm slowly getting used to the dangers.
I've never been in danger because I ask God to protect me.
I know it's called the road of death, but nothing has ever happened to me, thank goodness. I try to keep calm.
The drivers don't like to talk about the mixed feelings they get every time they set out for the Yungas region. Many of them have already been involved in accidents there. At a checkpoint on the edge of town, the police ask where the driver is heading to. They ask to see the vehicle documents and the driver's license. In an emergency, the authorities need to know whom to look for in the mountain region. The road claims 200 or 300 victims every year. Time and again, people disappear without trace, despite police checks. Once the driver has passed through the checkpoint, it usually gets very quiet inside the bus. Some passengers keep an anxious eye on the weather, others are simply tired after work, or they're praying for a safe journey. This is the kind of road the drivers in the South Yungas region can expect over the next few hours. A cliff face on one side and a chasm on the other. The narrow grey strip of road winds its way around the mountain, kilometre after kilometre. Even though the drivers know the road inside out, caution is still called for. The weather can change suddenly. The men always have to be on the lookout for landslides and rockfalls.
I've been driving a bus through the Yungas region since I was a young man. And that's a good thing, because if you are only used to driving on normal roads in the lowlands and suddenly find yourself on these roads, you can easily lose your nerve. So it's good to become familiar with a dangerous road like this while you're still young. One driver will have stronger nerves, while another will perhaps prepare more for the journey. As for me, I've been driving on the most dangerous roads in Bolivia ever since I was a youth. Practically my entire life.
It's only a matter of time before the weight of buses and trucks causes parts of the road to crumble or heavy downpours erode the surface. Nearly everyone talks about dangerous situations, collisions, and fears they've experienced. Every bend harbours a risk. Every trip could be your last. Isaac had one very sobering experience. Now he's always accompanied by his wife, who usually prays during the journey.
It happened just after I had started work for the day. We were on our way to Cholumani when I collided with another bus on a blind bend. Speed, of course, always plays a role in such accidents. Because I was driving uphill and he was coming down. He couldn't brake hard enough on the bend. His bus started to swerve and we collided.
An everyday experience that's part and parcel of a risky job. At the same time, Dieter Hübner is driving on the North Jungas Road nearly 2,000 metres higher up. This paved bypass was only opened in 2006. When Dieter was still racing and rallying in the 70s and 80s, there were only dirt tracks up here. Today, the old North Jungas Road is only used by a few adventurers and, of course, former racing driver Dieter Hübner.
This is now the classic Jungas Road. Many years ago, I used to race on it. And on 2 occasions, I even won.
Dieter doesn't compete anymore, but such is his passion for the road and the region that he still likes to motor up here. Being on the road with this former racing driver is like taking a trip through Bolivia's checkered history and the political upheavals of the 1940s.
This is one of the deepest parts of the Jungas Gorge. It's a steep drop of around 400 meters. This is a monument to the politicians who were murdered here in 1944. They were shot and their bodies thrown into the gorge. It wasn't until many years later that they were found by a racing driver. Alberto del Carpio, who competed in the 40s and 50s. The corpses were still clothed and even had documents on them, so it was possible to identify them.
Bolivia's bloody revolutions are now history, but the dangerous roads in the Jungas region still claim many victims today. The somber statistic for just 3 months reads 63 dead, 400 injured and 11 missing. The officer of a famous firefighting unit, the Bomberos, gave us the details of one serious accident.
The bus was traveling along with no problem, but at this point the driver lost control. Instead of taking the bend, he drove straight on, came off the road and plunged into the gorge. The worst accident I've experienced occurred on January 21st, 2013. I got a call at 5 in the morning asking me to lend a hand. When I arrived at the scene, it still wasn't clear how many people had been injured. First of all, we rescued 26 bus passengers who were more or less seriously injured. Then, in a depression, we found a 3 or 4 month old baby that was already dead. It was just as bad finding victims whose bodies had been torn apart. My team and I managed to save one woman who was pinned to a tree by a branch that had gone through her spine. It took a massive effort to lift her out of the gorge, but we got her to hospital in time.
Spectacular rescue operations like that have earned the Bomberos heroic status in Bolivia. Like most drivers, Isaac chews coca leaves when he's at the wheel. They guard against fatigue and anxiety. Here in the Yungas region, there are thousands of cocaleros, as the coca farmers are called, and they are all legal. Coca leaves are an indigenous natural product, like bananas, mangoes and coffee. When mixed with saliva in the mouth, the dried leaves release alkaloids, which deaden hunger sensations and help to combat fatigue and mountain sickness, something they've been used for centuries. It was only the prosperous world of the West that began using the leaves to make cocaine, but for the cocaleros, the leaves are a basic element of life and a part of Andean culture. Farmers receive around €4 for a pound of coca leaves, but those who produce cocaine from the harmless leaves earn millions.
Señor, disculpe, buenas tardes. ¿Con qué permiso está filmando?
Many people here believe that the road is cursed because in the 1930s it was built by Paraguayan prisoners of war. They see that as the reason for the many victims. The heavily laden trucks and buses on their way to La Paz are supposed to drive as close as possible to the cliff face to prevent even more of the road's soft surface sliding down into the valley. If passing is impossible, one vehicle has to reverse, sometimes for more than a kilometre. Like its predecessors, the present Bolivian government tries to maintain the South Yungas Road, but time and again the torrential streams of the rainy season from November to March flush entire sections of it into the depths. For the time being, there won't be another bypass here like the one on the North Yungas Road. The villages of the hinterland are not important enough for such an expensive construction project. Consequently, every year construction teams move out to repair the damage caused by landslides and to pave the road as best they can. So farmers will have to continue selling their fruit, coffee and coca in the capital La Paz after travelling there along the Carretera de la Muerte, the road of death. Travelling by car in the Ivory Coast in West Africa can be very relaxing. Finished in 1964 and built mainly for politicians and diplomats, the highway between Abidjan and Yamoussoukro is an extremely smooth ride. Once a year, Justin Zongo, a bus driver from Rüsselsheim in Germany, comes back to visit friends and relatives. But the road he has to take to the small village of Wawakrul, 90 kilometres north of the capital, is strenuous and full of dangers. It's definitely not for the faint-hearted. When Justin heads for his home village, he's not on the luxury highway for very long. Outside the capital, roads like this are all too often the reality of driving in the Ivory Coast.
My goodness, this year's really bad. Oh my lord.
Jesus.
You've got to know what to expect on roads in the Ivory Coast. And if you break down, you must be able to help yourself. Where traffic regulations are concerned, this is a totally different world. It's wise to heed orders from the police and the military because in 2010 and 2011, violent unrests resulted in hundreds of deaths. Getting around on roads here calls for courage, skill and, above all, the right vehicle. Justin knows where to look. Here, repair shops and car rental places are not housed somewhere, they're out on the road. Justin knows exactly what kind of car he's looking for.
A BMW would be really good because it has rear-wheel drive.
But the silver BMW still needs some work on it, and some of the other vehicles he's offered are simply not an option for Justin. Fixed seats are the very least he needs for his trip. In the end, he decides to rent a comfortable French car. It might not have rear-wheel drive, but it does come with valid documents. Justin is assured that the vehicle is in excellent condition. In the mid-90s, he is told the same model was even driven by the President of France. The trip to the remote village of Wawakru is an adventure, but one Justin embarks on every year to see his family and friends. Even in the capital, you need all your wits about you.
If you bump someone on the road or cause an accident, nobody's going to come. No one gives a damn. Nobody asks to see your documents. Life here is a fight for survival.
The first 60 kilometres in the early morning are easy. The road is paved, the temperature tolerable, and there are no bandits in sight. But the weather and the terrain are about to change.
The rains make things difficult. You have to go up and down hills, and that's really dangerous. I hope I'll make it and see my friends. But it's going to be tough.
This is the exit on the highway to get to the village of Wawakru. The road is not signposted, nor is there any indication of the distance. Out in the bush, you have to know your way around, otherwise you'll never find the right place to cross over and leave the highway. For the next few days, this will be the last time Justin feels asphalt under his wheels on his way to and from Wawakru. Anyone travelling on four wheels here in the bush is either looking for adventure or has to work hard for a living. Jibril is 40. That's also the age of the military truck he's been driving through the bush to plantations ever since 2006. Remote villages and communities pay him to fetch coca and other products from the hinterland. It's a tough job, but Jibril thanks God for it every day and prays to him for help.
Driving into the bush at all is difficult and dangerous. But the rainy season is a real problem for us. Driving up some hills in the mud, you simply slide back down. If you're not careful, your truck can even flip over. Or trees toppled by the wind could land on your roof.
No one here can afford their own car. People get around on foot. The odd motorbike might be able to cope with the conditions, but there's no guarantee. Anyone who is sick or injured has to be carried out of the village on a homemade stretcher. Even turning the stubborn truck on the narrow road fringed by plants is exhausting work. Jibril spent 3 years as a co-driver before he was allowed to drive in the bush on his own. Every downpour washes away the sides of the road more and more. Even when it's dry, apart from the army trucks with their high chassis, no one here drives on four wheels, neither uphill nor downhill. Apart, that is, from Jibril. On every trip he bangs his head several times, sometimes on the roof, sometimes on the window and sometimes on the mirror. But in low gear, he has to keep his foot down. Otherwise, he'll never make it. Pouring rain or when the truck is carrying a full load, the route is always arduous and painful. All Jibril can do is pray. After years behind the wheel, he readily admits that his job is a mixture of experience, technique, and divine assistance.
This road is an absolute beast, but sometimes if I haven't driven it for a week, I miss it. But then, when I have to drive it again, I get scared. Afterwards, I'm all in, simply exhausted.
In his black limousine, Justin is pressing on. The sun is high and the outside temperature has now risen to 34 degrees. But inside the vehicle, it's at least 50. The blistering heat and the constant rocking are tiring. Anyone who gets careless and loses control can easily roll their car. Even though Justin knows the route well, it's still full of obstacles and surprises. Last time he came along here, this bridge was in better condition.
Last time, this lock was over there. How do I get across? I'm not sure I should risk it. If the car gets stuck, I've got a real problem. The locks haven't been laid properly, so there's a danger of the car slipping off. There are gaps everywhere. The BMW would have been better. But unfortunately, I have to watch how much I spend.
Das wäre besser mit dem BMW, aber leider habe ich keine dicke Portemonnaie.
The comfortable French model isn't exactly the right car for this terrain, but the choice of vehicles wasn't great, and besides, as a bus driver, Justin's funds are limited. The front-wheel drive doesn't like the round logs on the bridge. Soon there's smoke and the unmistakable smell of burning wood and rubber. Nevertheless, after a few unsuccessful attempts, Justin makes it across the bridge after all. He heads on through the bush and the rubber plantations, always in a northwesterly direction. Anyone who comes this far will find land that has been cleared of forest for agriculture. If it weren't for the road, people say, nothing would ever change here. Without a proper road, produce could never reach the processing firms and consumers, and that is only one of the country's problems. Shortages, deprivation and poverty. Apart from poorly paid work in the fields, the countryside offers hardly any prospects, especially for young people. Driven by hunger, these boys are digging in the earth right next to the road. With a bit of luck, they might catch one of the inhabitants of this rabbit warren, because for most families, meat is rarely on the menu. Around 16% of the children here are underweight. Life expectancy is no more than 57 years. But despite all their efforts, these lads will have to go without extra protein once again. While the boys are heading for home, disappointed, Justin is having even more problems. This time he's stuck. The mud hole has proved too much for a front-wheel drive car with moderate tyres. A few workers are trying to get him out. They're not worried about getting dirty. They all lend a hand. Out here, people all help one another. That's the rule of the road.
If someone needs help, I don't have to ask him what the problem is. I just lend a hand. I have to help. Here in Africa, it's an obligation.
Half pulling, half pushing, everyone pitches in. And at some point, the Peugeot really does emerge from the mud. It's a duty to help out on the road. Justin also knows that people here don't have much and are grateful for an extra bit of cash, so he obliges. But no one can tell him how far it is to the next village. Out here, it's times that matter.
We don't judge distances in terms of kilometers. We use time. A walk, say, from 7 to midday. That's how we describe distance, not in kilometers.
The sun is at its zenith and the heat of the car is oppressive. After countless bends, hills and clouds of dust, Justin has finally reached the village of Wawakru. The entire population has turned out in welcome. Everyone wants to greet the rare guest personally. That's always the case. Everyone wants to know how Justin is getting on as a bus driver in Europe, what he does and how he lives. Justin patiently explains every detail to the men of the village. He answers all the questions about his job, about the living conditions, the snow and road traffic in Europe. His friends want him to stay longer, And each time they all find it hard to say goodbye, but Justin knows he has to leave now.
You can't drive fast on this road anyway. You have to take it slowly. And bandits are always lying in wait. They demand money. And they're armed. It's really dangerous.
So Justin takes only short breaks. Up to now, he has always been lucky. He avoids unpleasant encounters as far as possible. He eats and drinks at the wheel and only gets out in an emergency. In the village, it's afternoon and the last sacks of cocoa for the day are being loaded. The truckers, too, are glad for every day that passes without incident. Justin is tired, but relieved to be back on the highway again. When he finally reaches the repair shop, mechanics, the car, rental man, and some onlookers are already waiting. 2 days ago, they were joking about who would wilt first, the Peugeot or Justin, but now they're all curious. Justin loves his job as a bus driver in Germany, where he says the roads are pure luxury. His family and friends are looking forward to Justin coming back next year. Then, he hopes he'll be able to get hold of a BMW with rear-wheel drive for the trip to Wawakru, or even an off-road vehicle. With its dense forests and steep mountains, travelling in the Caucasus has always been dangerous. Where Georgia borders on Chechnya and Dagestan and the mountain people are called the Tusheti, a road has been carved out of the rock. The Tusheti Road, a breathtaking route of wild beauty. Heiner Boer came to Georgia 15 years ago in search of adventure. It was out of pure curiosity that he first travelled along this road to Omelo, on the load bed of a military truck.
This road always stirs a whole gamut of feelings in you.
Ein ganzes Spektrum an Gefühlen, ja.
That initial curiosity soon became a passion. Today, Heiner Boer organises adventure and cultural tours in Georgia. He's driven the Tusheti Road so many times, but he remains well aware of its many dangers.
You always need to have total concentration and be prepared for the unexpected. That might be a rockfall or a sudden change in the weather. It might start snowing, for instance. You might come across mud holes or a load of scree that has slipped down, partly blocking the road. Then you have to decide whether you can just about get through. Should I risk it or should I turn back?
When Tusheti and the lowlands visit their relatives in the mountains, they hire local drivers who are familiar with the Tusheti Road. Valeri used to play here as a child. Later, he'd gallop round the hazardous bends on horseback. Even today, he drives very close to the edge, taking anyone prepared to pay €100 for a trip into the mountains of the Caucasus.
Many truck drivers who call themselves professionals are scared of driving up here in the Tusheti Mountains. But there really is a big difference between driving down in the lowlands and driving up here.
Whenever two vehicles pass up here, the drivers always stop and chat about what the road looks like over the next few kilometres. Because up here, there is no cell phone reception. It wasn't until 1978 that the Soviets blasted a road out of the rock. Before then, the Tusheti Road was at best a trail that was only accessible to hikers and riders in summer. No one has ever counted how many people have died on this road. It was only recently that plaques were put up to commemorate those killed in accidents. Valeri showed us the place where in 2010 a momentary lapse of concentration cost the life of 3 of his friends. They came off the road in fog and plunged 70 meters into the gorge. Ever since then, Valeri has unbuckled his seatbelt whenever he drives into the mountains.
It has nothing to do with macho behavior. I do it because I think it's safer. Up here you can sometimes hear danger before you actually see it. If there's a landslide, for instance, you can get out of the car faster if you're not wearing a seatbelt. You gain precious seconds. It's as simple as that.
The 4,000 or so Tusheti in the far northeast of Georgia are regarded as a proud, perhaps headstrong people who've always been keen motorists, even under Soviet rule. In those days too, they lived cut off from the rest of Georgia. The road was built to make it easier to take cattle, sheep and wool down into the valley, and to control the Tusheti more closely and quickly, and send troops into the mountains in an emergency. In the Civil War upheavals of the early 90s, criminals cut down the power lines and sold off the precious metal. Without electricity, the region now seems really archaic and fairly isolated, but the unspoilt beauty of nature here is impressive. We're now approaching the Abano Pass. The road is getting narrower and the rock face steeper and steeper. Anyone who lives here for some time soon learns the laws that apply on and off the road.
If you encounter a driver coming from the opposite direction and he's carrying, say, 100 liters of wine, you both stop. He invites you, and the next half or 3/4 of an hour are spent chatting and drinking. Before saying goodbye and getting back to the road, you make a toast to the Lord and the road itself, and to the memory of those who have died on it. It all goes together. The danger, faith, and also the drinking. Not to drink is to violate every custom. So often, there's no getting around having a glass or two.
This is the only building far and wide, a house made of natural stone on the edge of the Tusheti Road. It's home to a man known to everyone as Uncle Scott. Together with a deputy and a colleague, he works just below the Abano Pass for the Georgian Department of Roads. In the mornings, a shot of vodka is just as much part of breakfast here as fresh bread and the local sheep's cheese. Uncle Scott has been working up here for nearly 40 years, ensuring that the road remains somehow passable, at least from June to October. On the agenda for today is a once-over for a vehicle that has been in service for as long as Uncle Scott himself. As real tractoristi, he and his colleagues know every screw on the steel workhorse. So naturally, they are able to keep the old tractor, as they call it, in perfect shape. Every driver that comes past drops in to say hello to Uncle Scott and tell him about any glacier or rockfall that has descended and is blocking the road. Uncle Scott will then climb aboard his tractor and push whatever is in the way down the slope. Up here, 3,000 meters above sea level, there are no trees anymore, just rocks, ice, and solitude.
You always have in mind that you're totally dependent on your vehicle, on everything working perfectly. No ruptured pipes or leads, resulting in you losing brake fluid or your power steering. And you want everything that is mechanical to function flawlessly. Up here, 80 kilometers from the next town, there's no one to help you.
A year ago, a wealthy Russian broke down in his 4x4, so it had to be airlifted into neighbouring Chechnya by helicopter. That operation, as locals here will tell you with a smile, cost just as much as the vehicle itself, so you need to look after your car and keep it in good condition. On the other hand, you can't afford to be too sensitive about it on the Tusheti Road. Motorists share the route with lots of animals, and they are every bit as important to the Tusheti as sheet metal on four wheels is to others.
This is where a cow scraped past and dented my car, just like the horse that couldn't handle this bend once did. You see, it's only small, but fixing it cost 200 euros.
But on the summit of the Urbano, rockfalls or avalanches can quickly have totally different consequences.
My cell phone shows an altitude of 2,869 meters. The official figure is 2,870 meters.
On the other side of the Urbano, it has got warmer. Uncle Scott and his men have their hands full because when the meltwater builds up pressure on the slate rock, danger threatens.
The thaw and erosion have caused a huge slab of rock to shear off. It looks like it might have happened only an hour ago. At first glance, I thought we'd never be able to get past. But on closer inspection, I saw that 3 of my wheels still had solid ground under them. So we were able to make our way across. The rocks have really sharp edges. And on the left, we had to watch that they didn't slit open our tires. I've checked, and the tires have suffered some cuts. But they're basically okay. We just have to make sure that nothing else comes crashing down here.
The Tusheti road seems to have a magical appeal for adventurers, despite, or perhaps because of, its dangers.
This is an overland trip, no? Greece, Turkey, Iran, Armenia, now Georgia, little piece of Russia, Yalta, Ukraine, Romania, Serbia, Croatia.
The man has got nerves. He's not fazed by the sharp edges of the rocks. After all, he plans to visit all those places in 40 days.
Naturally, there are a whole host of stories associated with the road. One involves a young driver and a landslide. The Tusheti road follows a kind of serpentine shape, and one day a landslide broke loose. As it cascaded down over various sections of the road, this young driver said afterwards he heard this loud, roaring sound and slammed on the brakes. Then, just 50 meters ahead of him, the landslide plowed across the road. A few meters further on, and he would have been killed. Strokes of fate like that are commonplace here.
At some times of the year, people and animals are on the Tusheti road at the same time. Especially in August, thousands of sheep, cattle and horses are driven down into the valley. Heino Buhr documents every trip on the Tusheti road. He photographs dangerous sections of the road or places where the view is particularly beautiful, like it is at the end of the road at the fortress in Omelo.
From there, theoretically, you can only continue on foot, and even then only in the summer months, in June, July, August and September. Beyond these white mountains lies Chechnya. These jagged, snowy peaks belong to Dagestan, and Dagestan is part of Russia. This is one of the most beautiful roads in the world.
The word Caucasus comes from the Greek. It means shining mountain ice or white as snow. Anyone prepared to accept the challenges of the Tusheti road between May and September is rewarded with the wild, breathtaking beauty of an unspoilt mountain landscape. Some of the dangers on roads have natural causes. Travellers are under threat from the climate, avalanches and landslides. Other risk factors include family duties, pressure at work and social hardship. They force people to take a risk in getting from A to B every day. Other dangers can be put down to human error, like a lack of concentration or a mistake at the wheel. But simple bad luck can also mean tragedy on the roads of death.